Thank you again for joining us. So we are going to have our Coffee Connect, our summer Coffee Connect on nurturing yourself to grow your students. And we're going to talk a little bit just about that overview of social emotional behavioral learning. And then we're also going to go into just that the importance of taking care of yourself so that you guys in turn can take care of your students. So just some introductions here. So I'm Jill Gunther. I'm one of the social emotional behavioral learning specialists with Nebraska NeMTSS. And as you can see on the screen there, so I serve regions 3 and 4, and those cover ESUs 1, 7, and 8, and then also 9, 10, 11, and 17. And I'll let Emily and Mackenzie introduce themselves.
Held out long enough.
Anybody?
I'm Emily Arkfeld. I am also social emotional behavioral learning specialist. I serve Region 5, the Panhandle of Nebraska, 13, 15, and 16 for the ESUs.
Awesome. Thank you.
And I'm Mackenzie Rydell. I am the 3rd SEBL Specialist, and I serve Regions 1 and 2, so the southeastern side of the state.
Perfect. Thanks, ladies. So we are going to start, we always like to start with a welcoming inclusion activity. And we thought, what better than to just describe your perfect summer day in 3 words or less. So maybe that's something that you already had your perfect summer day. Maybe it's something that you're looking forward to, or maybe it's just something that you strive for to enjoy during those summertime. So if you guys would just think for a moment, 3 words or less, how you would describe that perfect summer day. And it sounds like we might have like the perfect weather for a summer day today. Nice and hot. Well, hopefully you guys can continue to enjoy those perfect summer days. I know we're kind of ending this summer. I hate to even say that, but continuing to enjoy those things that bring you joy, those things that bring you happiness, especially during as we're gearing up to start the next school year. On this slide here, I will just point out that we do have a link for, it's called beach imagery. So just another just kind of welcoming inclusion activity that you guys could do maybe as you're starting the new school year, within your classroom or some meetings with staff, whatever it might be. But it's just kind of a nice little way to get started that you can just kind of take the time to quiet the noise and really just gear up for whatever is coming next. So if you go to YouTube, there's lots of different options. You can search for kind of that time frame that you're looking for, but this was just one that we wanted to include for you guys as well. All right. If you joined us in the spring for our Coffee Connects, we had a Padlet to go along with each of our SEBL competencies. So we wanted to continue that just for an easy way for you guys to go and access resources that we're sharing with you. So we do have a Padlet for this Coffee Connect as well. So starting it off in the first couple columns with things that you hope to gain, maybe any questions that you have. And those two, especially those 2 columns are important for us, just as we continue to plan our next Coffee Connects. We will share our save the dates for the fall. We're going to do a Coffee Connect each month. But that just kind of helps us know what you guys are really looking for and to make sure that we're including that in each of our sessions. We then have a column for some different mental maintenance activities and resources. We'll go through some of them today, but there's even more that we have pinned in the Padlet. So be sure to take a look at those. And then we have some video resources really just around SEBL, and then just some other resources that we wanted to share with you guys. And then we also have all of our previous Coffee Connects. So if you guys are looking for those, we did them over each of the competencies. And so those are all linked in there as well. Oh, and I should mention, so when you click on that link for the Padlet, it does require a password. We have it on that slide there. So it is capital NeMTSS. And Mackenzie or Emily, if you would drop in the PDF for the slides for everybody as well. That way you guys have those links if you want to check them out. All right. So as I had mentioned, we're going to talk just a little bit about, caring for yourself. And as you can see here on this slide, so self-care, pampering, coping, self-maintenance, all kinds of different words are thrown around. And honestly, like anymore, it feels like self-care is kind of a trigger word, especially for educators. But we just want you to realize, to understand, you call it what you want. We don't want it to be a trigger word, because we really want you guys to think about it really is doing what's best for you. It's important to remember that all of the different strategies that keep us happy, that keep us healthy, and keep us well functioning, that is really what self-care, or whatever you want to call it, is. It really involves really thinking about and taking that role of protecting our own mental well-being. And not just for that moment in time, but for the long term. And so we really want to think about, what is it that gives you as an individual energy? What is it that drains your energy? And what is it that protects your energy? So when we think about self-care, sometimes we think about, those face masks, or going and getting a massage, or taking a hot bath. And while all those are great things and things that you may need in that moment in time, we really want to think about what is going to keep you happy and healthy for the long term as well. So it might be just those things that bring you happiness as well, and continue to build on that happiness. Maybe it's cooking a meal for family, or just sitting down as a family. Maybe it's just getting outside and taking a walk and taking those breaths of nature. Maybe it's just crossing some things off of your to-do list. Whatever it might be, just remembering that self-care really isn't about that instant gratification. It's really about what is going to keep me happy and healthy for the long term. So we really like this quote here, and it's really just a good reminder about, we can't self-care our way out of problems. Sometimes we really have to recognize, we really have to acknowledge those feelings before we can move past them. So this is just a nice little quote, kind of visual here, that we wanted to share with you. So just as we did in all of our previous Coffee Connects, we also like to start with a little foundational overview of what is social emotional behavioral learning, just as a quick little review. So we have our definition of SEBL, and really focusing on that B part as well, because we really want social emotional learning and behavior. We are bringing them together because we know that they are very much intertwined. They very much affect one another. And just as it says on the screen here, we need those social and emotional skills for students and for adults to create those safe and supportive environments so that we can have those positive behavioral outcomes. And here, just that reminder that we need all of those social, emotional, behavioral learning competencies in order to show those positive behaviors. So we need those skills of being able to handle conflict, being able to handle disappointment, being able to handle frustration in order to have those positive behavioral outcomes. And like I said, somewhere along the line, that social emotional learning and that behavior became split, but we're really working to bring them back together because we don't want them operating in silos, just as we have here all of the different systems that support students here on the next slide. We really want them working together. So we have behavior, we have social emotional, mental well-being, academics, climate, all of the things working together, because we know that they very much are interconnected. Here we have our web of all of the different competencies. So this should look familiar to you guys if you attended any of our Coffee Connects in the spring. So we built this web around each of the 5 competencies, and we really have all of the skills here that we've identified within each of those competencies. So again, we would encourage you guys, if you missed out on any of those Coffee Connects, to go back and watch those, because we do focus on each of the different ones throughout our Coffee Connects. And then moving into adult SEBL. So we have a nice definition here, and really thinking about social emotional behavioral learning as it applies to adults, especially because if we don't have those skills, we can't teach them to our students. So really thinking about the why then of adult SEBL. So we know, especially the last few years, just the stress, the burnout, the turnover, all of the things, it continues to get harder. And we really want to give you guys some different strategies to help build that capacity, to help you guys strengthen those skills and the abilities to survive and to adapt and to thrive in that educational environment. Because when we think about it, really strengthening that adult SEBL is going to give us those skills in order to foster those positive school climates, in order to, like I mentioned, model that SEBL. Because again, we can't teach what we don't know. Some of the just different areas that we wanted to touch on here. So a lot of different things can have that negative impact on educator well-being. And so as you guys can see here, so that teacher social emotional competence. So those skills, those social emotional behavioral learning competencies and skills. Work resources, so having that maybe limited access, whether it's to staffing, whether to actual working resources or to professional learning can have a negative impact. The school organization, so that lack of support for teachers, the leadership, the challenges, those climate factors, and then job demands. So just those increasing demands within the classroom environment, classroom management, just those outside factors as well for both the classroom and for the students. So all of those things can have a negative impact, which again is why we really want to focus on that adult SEBL. Adult SEBL can have so many different benefits, including that increased mental well-being, increased job satisfaction. We see that improved overall academic test scores, student behavior, and then that just overall positive school climate. And then we just wanted to share a quick little video with you guys that we really enjoy. And so Emily, if you want to go ahead and start that.
Teachers are always going to be stressed because they want to be the best. Teachers have to do everything. Teachers have to work extra hours. Teachers have to plan, prep, grade. Teaching has always been a stressful job, but right now it's off the charts.
You want to know what predicts classroom quality, at least according to research? Teachers' social and emotional well-being. Better than their preparation or their experience.
As a school, if you don't have a strong social and emotional foundation, you'll find lots of cracks. It's the key and the foundation for everything else.
If you want a healthy, positive school culture, invest in teachers' well-being. When teachers' emotional and social needs are met, they establish a really positive learning environment for their students.
Okay. I love that video, and I've seen it so many times, and I still tear up a little bit at the beginning with all of the words about what our educators are, because our educators fill so many roles for our students in our community, and they do it in so many fantastic ways. So we need to make sure that we are taking care of them and making them feel valued so that they continue to stick around and do the great work that they are doing. So following this, we found this quote, and it's from 1972, if you haven't seen it. And what I love about it is that we have known this about education and about our teachers for decades, half a century. And so we need to just continue to move that forward. You can read it. I'm going to read it also. I've come to the frightening conclusion that I am the decisive element in the classroom. It's my personal approach that creates the climate. It's my daily mood that makes the weather. As a teacher, I possess a tremendous power to make a child's life miserable or joyous. I can be a tool of torture or an instrument of inspiration. I can humiliate or heal. In all situations, it is my response that decides whether a crisis will be escalated or de-escalated and a child humanized or dehumanized. And we don't ever share this quote with the intent of making someone feel bad or judged, or we don't want to offend anyone, but we really want to empower our educators to know like they do have this power and they do have the power to really change a child's life. And so in doing that, we want them to make sure that they're taking care of themselves and putting their needs first so that they can then take care of our students, but also to our leaders, recognizing that they need to be taking care of their educators to make sure that the educators can take care of their students. It all is this trickle effect, but a cyclical effect as well, but kind of just hits home what we're talking about here today. So we'll go through these more individually throughout a little bit here, but we put these, I think they're just nice also in this little graph table chart to share easily. But going back to those 5 competencies that we've talked about, and we did our last Coffee Connects on, self-awareness is really knowing yourself and looking within and figuring out how you're feeling and what are your wants and needs and values. And then how are you managing all of that and all of your stressors and asking for help when you need it, and using your self-awareness and self-management to make responsible decisions, and giving yourself grace when things are hard and you need to set boundaries and say no because it's not a good decision for you, being able to do that and feel okay about that. And having those relationship skills with yourself, with your colleagues, with your students and out in your community, and help building up, who you are through your relationships. And having social awareness and being mindful of how your behaviors impact those around you, and seeking to connect and understand anyone who might be unlike you. So looking at self-awareness and self-management, talked about this, knowing your emotions, strengths, and needs. And then how are you managing those as well? How are you regulating, especially when you are feeling very dysregulated, which is easy to get to that position in education. And so we wanted just to start with mindfulness. And I will be the first to say that mindfulness has been something that has also been a bit of a trigger word for me. And so learning more about it. And recently I had the pleasure to spend a couple days with Erin Weiner and the Wisdom House with the Search Inside Yourself through Google leadership training, and learn some more. So that's where these mindfulness micro practices come from. I'm going to open it up actually and show you a little bit of what these are. And what I like about this is that like the easy definition of mindfulness is paying attention on purpose to the present moment. And I think in education, in lots of jobs, but in education, it's hard to do that. So if you are a person who's getting other humans out of the house in the morning, and that is stressful, and you're rushing them out, and you're getting to school and you're trying to make sure you've got your plans, and then your kids come in all in a frenzy because the school day has started, and then you're transitioning to the next thing, and then to lunch, and then you're bringing them back. And it's always kind of just this like roller coaster. And so what I love about these micro practices is they are short. They are like a minute-ish, but they really just tell you, and if you do them with your students, gives you guys that moment to like, okay, this is what I was doing. Now I'm here and I'm going to focus here. And this is what I'm doing next. And so calming kind of all of that frenzy and getting you ready to focus on what's coming up next. So this like first one is just the 3 breaths. So on the first one, you just acknowledge like, okay, I'm breathing, paying attention to that. On your second breath, you let the body relax. And then third breath, what is important now? So you walk in the morning and, the bell's about to ring. And so you do this quick, and what is important now? And you just focus on that next piece of things and not think about what is coming after that. Similar to that minute to arrive, just take a moment to kind of reflect on what you have coming up and what you're letting go. Noting, I like this one when we think about when we are kind of on high alert or dysregulated, noticing what is going on, what am I feeling, why might I be feeling that way? Gosh, I notice that I'm feeling a little bit anxious. Why might that be? And so just taking these short moments to really look within and practice that self-awareness, so then you can practice those self-management skills and get yourself in a good place. And these are great for your students as well, because what's good for you is good for them and vice versa. So these are linked in here. And then I also like this. There are lots of these little things. And Erin, if you want to jump in with any of them, feel free. But just these moments to notice what you're thinking, feeling, doing. Take a second to breathe, kind of just relax and slow things down. Allow those feelings, kind of back to that quote about sitting with it, just allow them to come, and then figuring out, how do I want to act or respond in this moment? So it's trying to elongate that space between a feeling and an emotion and an action or a behavior. Also, if you guys have heard of or are doing the DBT in schools, so I just sat through a training on that also. And one of the things that I liked that they mentioned about mindfulness is that if you start activities or your day or a transition with a mindfulness practice, they don't always have to be quiet and reflective inside, but also just about being, like, going back to that, being fully present in the moment. And so you can do a like sound ball one where it's movement and it's motion and it's loudness. But it's that practice of being like fully present in the moment in what I'm doing, because when you're doing that in kind of these low stakes environment of just seemingly playing a game with your friends or your colleagues, then you're more likely to go in fully into practicing and learning new skills and implementing those when they're a little bit harder. It's kind of that muscle memory of like, oh, I know how to do this. I can be present in doing this, even if it's uncomfortable for me. And then we linked the professional quality of life assessment. Let's just call it what it is in here for you. It's short, it's 30 questions, but it really helps kind of see where you might be falling in compassion, satisfaction, burnout, and secondary traumatic stress. And then the self-care resource handouts link gives you some extra resources around that. So if you see you might be falling high in one of these areas, you can go to those links. Here, I'm going to show you this really quick too, because we have some time today. So quick 30 questions on a Likert scale, never to very often. And then it breaks it down and gives you a little bit of just kind of education and language around some of that. So take it for yourself, share that with your staff, at the beginning of the year, and get some information about where your staff and your colleagues are. And then, can use that if you are in an administrative position or someone who is supporting your educators, use that information to build your PD and things throughout the year to make sure that you are hitting the needs of your educators. And relationship skills. I think this, so yeah, okay. I just, relations, we need people, and we need these relationships with our students we know this, this is everything you learn as educators, that you have to have relationships, and you have to know your students to be able to connect with them and to get them to care about what is happening and what they're learning, and about school. And that is the same in our colleagues. We want to know that we are cared about, and we want to care about people. And that's what makes coming to work every day something worthwhile. I think I do talk about that later, so I apologize. So this is from Ruler, which is a SEL curriculum, and this is the blueprint. And then the difficult conversations model is also from the Search Inside Yourself, and they are similar. So I wanted to put both of them up here because the difficult conversations can be geared more towards adults, and the blueprint is something that kids might have a better time understanding. But you can either reflect on a difficult conversation that you've had and go through it from your perspective. How did you feel? What maybe caused these feelings, and how did I express and regulate them? But then also it's important to look at the flip side of that. So the person that I talked to or I need to talk to, what might their perspective be? And how do I think they feel about this? And where might that be coming from? And then try to come up with your plan to address that. And also acknowledging, like, what is my intention in addressing this? Is there going to be a positive outcome? Is the person in a place that they are ready to hear this now? And that helps keep that relationship piece going, because we are going to have conflicts and we are going to have difficult conversations in our lives, but taking the time and the space to step back and really look at them through our lens, but also the other person's lens, can help just make sure that we approach them in the correct manner to where they might have the most success. Okay. And so this is from The Greater Good. I think we share it every time we talk because they just have so many amazing resources on here. But helping build those like meeting rituals. So if you are doing this with your staff, we've given lots of questions, I think, about conversations to have in your class with your students, but these are good ones to have with the adults and the other educators and staff in the building. So these ones are free. These ones, I think the 52 Essential and the FETSER, I'm not sure, you have to purchase those ones. And we also are doing like a book study right now, talking about building trust within teams. And it talks about, yes, team building activities are fun, and it's fun to know like, oh, we both like this movie, or this is our favorite song, and connect with people in those ways. And that is like the foundation of where you build those relationships. But you also need to know things about people on a deeper level to know like, yes, I can trust this person, or yes, we have this rapport and this connection. So making sure as you're trying to build that culture and climate of positive relationships that you do go a little bit deeper than just some of those surface questions. Social awareness, again, understanding how our actions impact others, and building those connections within our building and our community with our students and families and colleagues, and then emphasizing and respecting others from diverse backgrounds and cultures. So I talked about this at the beginning. This is the one I knew I was getting to. But when employees feel that they are cared about and they care about others, they are more engaged in their work and have better relationships with colleagues and higher job satisfaction and are more likely to stay, which is what we all want for our educators right now, is to feel connected and valued, and they want to stay in the profession because they are so needed. And so they have this Care and Connection Google form. This is a copy of what we have done. So the forced copy is one that you can edit. This one is just to look at, but so this came from a conference, a school did this. And then we've kind of adopted it to fit our organization as well. But just some things to know about each other. So what's your favorite color, your drive-through drink order, vending machine stack, things like that. This song one, so the school that did it then built like a playlist of everyone's favorite song and shared that out. So, if you know that your sixth grade teaching partner is having a really rough time. So, and you can go to this and know, okay, I'm going to grab them this drink on my way into work, or coming back from a meeting, I'm going to grab them something from the vending machine. So it just helps build some of those connections that we might not know about. And when we want to help support our colleagues, it gives us a place to go to kind of figure out how we can do that in different ways than just with our words, because our words are important as well. And then we added these things that bring you joy. So along the sight, smell, taste, and hear. So the 5 senses, kind of just taking it one step further than those previous ones of just what some of your favorite things are. So that is, and then birthday, shirt size, things like that. So that's linked in here if you want to force a copy and make it kind of your own and share it out among your building or your staff or whoever. And then there's this gratitude curriculum linked in here. All of these things are in your Padlet, but I do like to show them too. And so just, remembering to take time for gratitude, for the things in our life and the people in our lives. And research, I'm not going to flip through that. And research has shown that, practicing gratitude helps boost our own self-esteem and our own self-worth and all of those competencies that we are trying to hit. And then volunteering isn't always something you think about. And I was questioning whether we put this one in here because we are asking so much of our educators. And then we're like, oh, and also go out and volunteer your time somewhere else. And it's like, do you not know how much I have on my plate? But it's not always something that we would think about when we think about self-care and taking care of ourselves. But when you give up your time to do something good for others, in addition to what you're already doing as educators, because that is 100% doing good for others, but it brings that unique sense of fulfillment from doing something kind. And it gets you out of the house and it gets you interacting with other people and building relationships and creating links in your community. Helps provide kind of that shift in perspective. So if you usually stay in this kind of circle of friends and colleagues and do something outside of the box, it helps you with that social awareness and just like, oh yeah, this is what's going on over here. Or I have an experience of this in my school, but these students and these staff are experiencing something similar in this community. So volunteering is proven to reduce feelings of stress and overwhelm, decreases the risk of depression, and reduces the feeling of isolation. So just an out of the box kind of thing that we wouldn't necessarily think about, but wanted to put in here. If you're looking for something else to do, this could be a good way to kind of boost those good feelings. And then responsible decision-making. So again, taking all of the things we know about ourselves and how we take care of ourselves and setting boundaries to make sure that we are making the decisions that are best for us in the moment. And if you think about it, the root of self-care is setting those boundaries, saying no to something in order to say yes to your own emotional, physical, and mental well-being. That is hard to do. And we don't always see that as part of like recognizing our self-worth. We have to take that time to do that. So here, a handout is linked here, and it just goes through all kinds of different boundaries. And so you can go through them and see which ones you do set, you might want to set, things that you might think should be on here that aren't on here. We've also had really good success when we do these in small groups of having them have conversations about what should be on here or what ones are really hard on here. And let's have some conversations around why those things are hard. So that's linked in here for individual use or for use in your buildings or your districts as well. But just that reminder of, needing to set boundaries to make sure that we are taking care of ourselves. And it's not a, we should do this. It really is a, we have to do this. And setting boundaries is that first step to putting other things into place to make sure that we are caring for ourselves.
Okay, so we're going to dive a little bit into the leadership, like what does that look like as a school leader, and then end with some other self-care resource type things, and then have some discussion if people are willing to talk and want to stick around and talk a little bit. So Emily just talked about setting boundaries, and while we all know this is really important, it almost seems like in the culture today, like teachers have so much on their plate. And so teachers who are advocates for their mental health and are setting those boundaries and are leaving work at work and able to really do that consistently almost seems like a revolutionary act. But it doesn't have to be. And if school leaders are able to prioritize their well-being and think about it a little bit more systematically and put some structures in place, they're going to be better able to support their educators in their school buildings to set those boundaries and to really prioritize their wellness. So shifting from the individual level self-care and well-being to the systematic level, because we know teachers can be really good at that, but that doesn't necessarily self-care them out of a bad system. So what can leaders do? I think the biggest thing they can do is give the teachers a voice and invite them to the table to talk and share their experiences, because they're the ones that are really in the I want to say war zone, but that sounds so negative. But they're the ones that are on the field, and they're working with the students every day. And like as administrators, you're also working with the students, but the teachers are really doing the everyday interactions, and they have a unique viewpoint. And so getting their viewpoint and then giving them some more freedom and choice as they're the ones that are making those decisions. Coming out of COVID, a big thing that people focused on is learning loss. Our kids have learning loss. There's loss of instruction. They're behind academically. And while that is all true, teachers teach because they want students to learn and they want them to be successful. And they kind of inherently or intrinsically know that no matter what, if COVID happened or not, the goal of them was to accommodate for that learning loss and move forward. And so flipping the script to responding to the behaviors, because sometimes we focus so much on the learning of academic topics that we forget about the behavior side. And as we have talked about many, many times in our Coffee Connects and in our trainings, we know that if students aren't taken care of from the behavioral side, then they're not going to be ready and able to learn. And so I'm focusing a little bit more on that behavior side than the learning loss side, because if the behaviors are taken care of, inherently the learning will come. And then creating a culture as leaders where the teachers and the staff don't feel guilty taking a sick day or a vacation day, or just saying no to covering a class on their plan period. There's a lot of shortages and we all know it's really stressful, but if they're constantly having to give up their time of planning and their time that is supposed to be set aside for them, then it's just not a great culture, and it can really wear down on the staff. So trying to create that culture of it's okay to take care of self. It's okay to take a day if you're not feeling well, or if you want to go on a long weekend and use a personal day, like don't feel guilty about that, because we all need to take some time for ourselves. And then sitting down and inventorying your initiatives, see opportunities that you can combine some, or maybe take some off the plate that have kind of fizzled out or aren't of huge importance, and just seeing where you can take some stuff off of educators' plate. We know that educators are burnt out, and while not all educators who are feeling burnt out will leave, we still see the effects of that in the classroom, because the way that teachers show up bleeds into the way that students learn, bleeds into the culture, and then it just kind of permeates. So like the video said earlier, if our students or if our teachers are taken care of, you really see the effect within your students and your entire community. And then lastly, just being real and authentic and optimistic and hopeful, but also just real that it is really hard, and trying not to be the toxic positivity of like, everything's great, it'll be okay. Like, we're going to make it through, to like, this is really hard. Like this past year has been difficult, and the class sizes or covering classes, like it's really difficult, and just acknowledging that and being real and not forgetting, because we all know, and it's easy to like glaze over and just move on because we got to run the course, but just taking some time to be real and be authentic. But then also don't be like too pessimistic, and try to see some of the optimism too. We talked about how our leaders really need to acknowledge and recognize and create the systems for our staff to be able to take care of themselves. But how might that look? What does that look like? Obviously, we work for Nebraska multi-tiered system of support, so we're going to advocate embedding it within your system. This is a resource here. So you've probably heard or seen or done yourself an individual self-care assessment, a link to a self-care plan. This resource here has that, but then it also has like a building or a school level plan. So as a team or as an administrator, you would go through and do this similar process. So you look at some warning signs, you would there's kind of like a list of things to look for within these different bullet points. So within your training and education, your support and supervision, your employee control, or that teacher voice again, peer communication in your work environment. And then you kind of assess what you might be doing in those areas and then adopt or create a plan for some things to adopt. And so if you're looking for kind of like a hard resource to inventory what you're doing building wide, this might be a resource for you. But then when we think of the multi-tiered system, what do our all staff deserve? What do we do for all staff? And that's not just teachers, that's also our custodial staff, the cafeteria staff, our paras, our front office staff. It's really encompassing of everyone. So what do those people need? We have some different ideas here. A welcoming, safe, inclusive environment, a space where people feel accepted to create healthy boundaries and that their boundaries will be respected, a time to learn and grow their own social emotional competencies and work wellness programs, a time to collaborate and learn together and grow together. From a professional standpoint. So we want all of our staff to have those opportunities, but then we know that some people might need a little bit more, or they might be interested in more. So this might look more like an opt-in thing. You're not going to force people to do this, but you could offer some book studies or some more like focus-based group. And so one example of this, when I worked in the schools, we had a walking group. And so after school, it was technically, I think, during contract time or maybe right after, but they would just get together and walk and talk. And that way they were able to get some steps in, and they weren't always talking about work. It was kind of that personal stories or things they're doing the weekend, or things that go beyond just what are we doing in the sixth period math today. And so that really just boosting the connectedness that ties into well-being. And then the mentoring and induction program for new employees, and going beyond just the first week of this is kind of how things run in the school, but how are we supporting those new staff throughout the year and maybe even the first couple years, and how are we really getting connected and investing in them and their well-being too. And then when we think of tier 3, you've probably heard of the employee assistant program that has those one-on-one counseling sessions that are complementary through the school district and the EAP. And then having some referrals within the community if staff are feeling like they need some extra support. And then one thing to consider with this is, who is the person that might know about these, and do the staff know they can go to that person? And so as a psych in a building, I was kind of that point person where if a staff was struggling or they needed to process something, they knew they could come to me. Or even I had a teacher who one of their friends was struggling and they didn't want to come talk, because sometimes those things are really personal and you might not want a coworker to know about them, but the friend was able to email me, who is another teacher, and say, like, can you point me to some resources? And so they knew that they could come, and then I could share the resources with them. So next slide is just a reminder that if we want our teachers to invest and love our students unconditionally, we as administrators and building leaders have to love our teachers unconditionally and just embrace them. And then the chart here, you can print it out if you're wanting to inventory or think about within a multi-tiered system how you can support staff. You can print that out and brainstorm on paper. We just have a couple more resources. We have some bingo cards. This is a kind of a fun idea where you could print out the bingo card and you could do like a staff challenge or a homeroom class challenge. Or you could just have them do it like as they want, but all of the bingo spaces are different things involved in like your well-being or self-care. And then there's 3 different cards. So there's the bingo card that is pictured with the link below. And then Jill created a couple of new ones with one is more of an adult focus and one is more of a student focus. And there are printable PDFs linked on the slide and also in the Padlet. We talked briefly about that building level self-care plan. There's also an individual self-care plan, an assessment linked within that one. But then this link is an Excel sheet that we created. We adopted it from a plan. So there's the plan, and then you can break it down, do the assessment and break it down into the different areas. And it is a forced copy, so you have to make your own copy if you're interested in doing that. So yeah, and there's a couple different options for that one. If you go through our training workshops, we do some time for this within the teams. And so you might have already seen it if you've done that. And just a reminder that what you do every day matters more than what you do once in a while. Self-care and mindfulness and continuing to take care of your well-being is just like exercise. If I do a couple sit-ups every day, I might have a bigger impact than if I do a couple sit-ups once a month, maybe more than a couple every day. But same as self-care. And as you practice them more consistently, they start to become more routine, and then you start to see more benefit and more results. And another little visual reminder that sometimes when we think about showing up daily, we think coming like our best day looks the best every single day, but sometimes our best on Monday might not look the same as our best on Wednesday. And it's okay if we're coming in at different, levels, and it doesn't necessarily have to be full every day. But when we're coming in and we're not feeling the greatest, we have our coping skills. And there's healthy coping skills and unhealthy ones. And typically the unhealthy ones are more habitual. They're easy. They're kind of like learned behaviors that we just do naturally. And then our healthy ones, we have to build into the routine with intentionality. And they're typically a little bit harder to do. But again, if you do them intentionally within your day, they can become a little bit more natural. So we have a couple different examples listed there. So that is all the content. Within our slides, we do have a lot of other resources in the Padlet. We knew we wouldn't have enough time to talk about everything, but we did link them all in the Padlet. And so if you're looking for more resources around this and you want to go beyond just the ones we shared in the slides, the Padlet would be a really good resource. And then as kind of a closing activity, we wanted you to write down on a sticky note or a piece of paper and just post it somewhere. You can stick it. What are 3 things that you want to try doing to continue advocating and being sustaining? I don't even know. My words are not coming out right. What are 3 words you want to do to help commit to sustaining yourself throughout this year? That's what I was looking for.